Hello everybody, it's Holger Mueller here from Constellation Research, here with Mustafa Isik from AWS. Welcome Mustafa, how are you?
I'm good. I'm thrilled to be here, and both of us are at reInvent, and you know how reInvent gets. It's what?
Yeah, it's the third day and we're still here with energy to talk about one of the more exciting topics around there, which is sovereign cloud, right?
I tend to agree. I have invested the last half decade of my career into this.
Your career into sovereign cloud, interesting. So why even sovereign cloud? There's been AWS data centers in Europe since, 10 plus years. Why do we need a sovereign cloud?
Well, I mean, the Frankfurt region has been around for even longer than 10 years, right? So, at AWS, we say, AWS is sovereign by design, and that comes with various provisions and various factors. Like, for instance, we've been the first major hyperscale cloud provider that actually made it possible for customers to decide where they place their customer data. And we have 143 security attestations, validations, and certifications
Always
in
been
place.
leading in those, yeah.
Exactly. Yep. That back up our claims about that. Mm-hmm. But then again, definitions of and requirements around data privacy, data protection, around IT security and certain threat models, also about certain interpretations of resilience change over time or are specific to certain stakeholders and certain types of workloads. And that's why we have always been sovereign by design. But then again, we also saw a need for something that we now call the AWS European Sovereign Cloud.
Right, and there's significant investment, right? It's not just marketing. There's significant investment. Where is it going to be spent for? What's going to happen?
Holger, that's a good way to put it. True. I mean, I never imagined in my career that I'd be involved in a project that actually yields a 7.8 billion euro investment. Okay. And, the AWS European Sovereign Cloud, I think it warrants to speak about, as you asked, how that manifests in the real world. But when you look at what that means is we're actually reinstantiating, rebuilding what has worked for so many customers from all walks of industry and all sizes, from two-people startups to the largest global enterprise customers or highly regulated industries, right? So what we're doing is we're taking what has solved so many customer challenges all over the globe, rebuilding it essentially, again, in a complementary manner, catering to certain different types of requirements within the European Union. And in this case, with the first new nucleus region that, the global cloud started with US East, Northern Virginia. This one starts with the region Brandenburg, the state, as both of us are German, so the state that surrounds the city-state of Berlin, a full-blown AWS region, same services, same APIs.
In Brandenburg or Brandenburg in English, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, why that location?
Well, Brandenburg comes, they support, the Brandenburg government, are very forward-thinking and very supportive and have the right energy mix. They have the right personnel. You have Berlin close by. So, they bring all the provisions that make it easy and made it easy for us to really get going real fast.
Okay. Is it already clear what kind of size of data center it's going to be? Like we all throw gigawatt numbers out these days.
Well, I am not going to throw out gigawatt numbers, but when I say it's not a lesser cloud, I think that's the important key takeaway. It is the same services, the same APIs. It's not a lesser cloud. It's not, one might think, oh, you know what, digital sovereignty blocked workloads might be or are by definition a subset of all addressable workloads, right? But then again, when you talk to customers, the one thing that customers, when they talk to us, that they rely on, that they ask for is, do I get the breadth of services that comes with AWS? Do I get the depth of services that I get with AWS? Do I get the security, which is foundational to sovereignty with AWS? Do I get the same SLAs with AWS? You know what? With the European Sovereign Cloud, you do. You get a multi-availability zone, full-blown AWS region.
Right. As much as we like Brandenburg as Germans, right? A nice state with not many people, nice lakes and so on. I'm sure our friends in France, Italy, other places don't like that so much. What's the plans of rolling out sovereign cloud across Europe?
So Holger, I wouldn't say that they don't like it. Europe is a union of, as 27 member states, right? And our experience is different. Our experience is that, what customers and partners, even cybersecurity regulators all over Europe very much like is the provisions that we provide for, data privacy, data protection, IT security, and resilience. So having the region built at the scale that we're building it for customers to be able to tap into the agility, flexibility, into the innovative capacity, into the resilience of what constitutes an AWS region. And we can talk more about what that truly is in its essence. Yeah, let's do it. But that's what excites them.
But let's start with the provisions though, right? You said security provisions, data residency provisions. Let's start with that a little bit and then we talk about high availability zones.
So What's really interesting about the European Sovereign Cloud, and before we dive into that, it bears repeating what AWS looks like when we look at AWS globally, right? And I know that you're acutely aware of what AWS looks like, but let's walk our audience through it and let's recap for ourselves, right? When we look at AWS, there are different perspectives you can assume. You can assume an infrastructure perspective and a service perspective. We've got it in our name, AWS, Amazon Web Services.
Right.
When you assume the infrastructure perspective, what is AWS today? It's, at last count, 38 global regions, every single region built in a very specific manner, right? Consisting of at least three availability zones. Some of them have 6 availability zones, and many, many data centers distributed across these availability zones. Now, what's interesting is, let's move from the infrastructure perspective to the service perspective. And that is, AWS has more than 240 services, and those you can distribute across all layers of the cloud computing taxonomy. Infrastructure as service services, platform as service services, software as service services, or even function as a service services, like Lambda, which we pioneered. Now, when you map the software world back to the hardware, the infrastructure world, these services have a certain scope. For instance, an EC2 virtual machine or bare metal server, if you provision in a pay-as-you-go model a server with, let's say, 64 cores, 1 terabyte of RAM, 5 terabytes of block storage attached, that's a resource, when you map it to the infrastructure, that lives in a data center in an availability zone as part of a region. So that's a zonal resource. Right. Now you can pick another service like object storage, S3 for instance, right? You have 5 terabytes of highly regulated imaging data, MRI data. If you pick a region like Frankfurt or Ireland or Stockholm, the data that you move to that region stays in that region. We back up with our commitments in the various audit reports, like BSI C5, all the various SOC reports, ISO 27001. That data stays there. We distribute it for you to provide a certain SLA across all availability centers and several of the data centers in that region. So that's a regional resource. The scope is a region. There are also global services, and I like to say it's not a bug, it's a feature, it's by design. Things like billing. For you to be able to have your workload in Frankfurt, have your, let's say, hot standby in Stockholm, your cold standby in Milan, and your backups on the other side of the planet in Tokyo, at the end of the month, what our customers want is one consolidated bill. That consolidation happens in Northern Virginia. That was the nucleus region of our global cloud. Now, we have some customers that for some workloads, especially when we talk about digital sovereignty, that say, you know what, those global dependencies, I'd very much like for these customer-created metadata to also stay within the EU. And now that we've talked and recapped the global cloud, it becomes conceptually very easy to grasp the European Sovereign Cloud because we're essentially moving all those formerly global dependencies to Brandenburg.
Okay. So Brandenburg is going to be US East for Sovereign Cloud.
I think that's
a simplification,
well,
or
that's a very
is
creative
it the idea?
way. That's a very creative way to
Okay.
put it, Holger.
Yeah.
But it comes with additional provisions. So we talked about the technical perspective now. Let's assume an operational perspective, right? If that's okay.
Right.
So,
But wait, I have to ask you before.
Oh, yes, please.
US East is like a very well-known thing. So is there a name already for the Brandenburg? Is it DE? I can guess NOR, or is there an acronym already which we can reveal to people here, or is it too early?
there is, but I don't know whether I'm at liberty to reveal it. But
Well, we can say DE, right? DE is in Frankfurt, right?
I can't even confirm that right now.
Okay, all right.
So let's see.
I tried
mean,
for the audience, right? I tried.
The SDK and the API builds are already done, so the moniker and the abbreviation is there. But
Yeah. Okay,
let's
there
hold
have to be
our horses for a
surprises.
couple
Okay, sounds good.
a very short time.
Sounds good.
But yeah, let's lead from the technology and infrastructure perspective to the operational perspective. As a computer scientist, I find that super interesting too, right?
Absolutely.
Because when you look at AWS, this is my way of putting it, AWS is the largest DevOps organization that I am aware of, right? It's our service teams, all the many, many service teams that build the services. They not only build the services, they also operate the services anywhere on the globe, right? In all the regions where a service is available. Now, we have another business and that we've been pioneering, that we are very experienced in for over 10 years, and that's the business where we help customers from intelligence or defense communities. That business has taught us a lot over the last 10 years, and we like to say that there's no compression algorithm for experience, and you know that line too.
True.
And in that business, we've learned, for some types of workloads and operational scenarios, customers want not the global development organizations to also operate, but they want a separate operations organization, right? Well, for the European Sovereign Cloud, we followed that playbook. So what we're doing and what we have been doing for the last few years is we have hired many, many new colleagues enabled them. These are system engineers, administrators, software developers, across the board in terms of IT jobs. And these people, these colleagues that we have hired within the EU, who are EU resident, who can only assume their operational role while they're physically present in a member state of the EU, these people are the only ones who will be operating the infrastructure and the services of the European Sovereign Cloud.
In the past, when that argument was played further, there was always also the question, what's the passport? Right, what's the citizenship? Any thoughts on the citizenship of those operators?
Yeah, I'll share more with you now and with our audience, and that is, we're starting with EU residents, but over the next 2 years, we're transforming that to EU member state passport holders, so citizens. But this is the way to start real fast, and we will transform this, going forward to EU passport holders.
Very good, excellent. Interesting question on the segue that, right? One of the announcements here was a DevOps agents for customers, right? Helping with the complexity announced here at reInvent 2025. I mean, it's going to be interesting for public sector customers as well, right? How does it relate to that? How do I make sure that a DevOps agent is a clean agent which doesn't have a backdoor which goes provides things everywhere else? How do you get the code transparency, which is the ultimate highest level of sovereignty? Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
So Holger, when you look at, let's talk about generative AI and AI services in general. So and this is something that doesn't just apply to the European Sovereign Cloud. It also applies to all of AWS and all the AI services that we have. When you look at our user agreements and the data protection addendum, what you will see today and have been for the last few years is, for our AI and ML services, customers are absolutely free to opt out of that data being used to train the underlying models. When it comes to our generative AI services and Bedrock services, the default mode is that data that you use for, let's say, inference, or the data that you use, let's say, in the context of Bedrock for retrieval augmented generation, RAG, or for even fine-tuning models, right? That data does not get used to retrain the underlying models, no matter who the provider is. So that holds true anyway. Now, when we look at the European Sovereign Cloud, that's an important takeaway. Remember how I said this is not a lesser cloud, this is a full-blown AWS cloud, right? It's not just a region, it's a cloud. So it comes with generative AI services from day one. So it comes with Bedrock, it comes with Q, with QuickSuite. So that's a powerful proposition. And that's what customers from highly regulated industries and customers from public sector, as you say, are eagerly awaiting for.
Yeah. No, and there's a criteria when I wrote reports about distributed clouds. I thought I made up a word called identicality, that you have the same technology stack. So you could use software assets, but you also can go to conference like here, and it's not going to be in 2 or 3 years we'll get the same thing or something. You don't have to wait for that. Yeah. So identicality is super important for sovereign cloud as well, because then you can move the workloads, you can use standard software, you don't have other dependencies which you have to wait for.
Damn.
Interesting.
In computer science we would say isomorphism. Yeah.
Isomorphism, correctly. That sounds a little bit too difficult. I thought I had to invent the word identicality, but it existed. It existed, yeah.
Okay, it did?
Yeah, identicality existed. Yeah. No, I was surprised myself. I thought I could claim one, but no, it exists. And what else is important to know about sovereign cloud by AWS in Europe? But what's going to happen in 2026?
So, let me call out another aspect that, again, as I said, I'm a technologist, but Holger, there were 2 things that I had. I mean, AWS is a huge learning experience in and out of itself, right? And 2 things that I had to learn is, on one hand, I had to learn about financial modeling to get an investment of 7.8 billion euro approved. But on the other hand, the other thing I learned is a lot about legal aspects, legal interpretations, and also the types of liberties that exist within legal texts and legal interpretations of legal texts, right? So what we have done, and that's very interesting about the European Sovereign Cloud, and also important to call out for, it comes with its own legal entity structure. So what we have done, and we've registered, if I remember correctly, in April, and we've been planning for this much longer with our legal colleagues, but we've registered 4 limited liability companies in Europe, specifically in Germany. So you and I know that limited liability company in Germany is a GmbH. So the AWS European Sovereign Cloud GmbH is run by a managing director under German corporate law, that's a Geschäftsführer, who's my boss, Stefan Israel, who used to run Ariane Space for the last 11 years. And he is bound, to act in the best interest, not of, the parent ownership or anything, but of the GmbH by law. Exactly. So he's responsible for 3 daughter GmbHs, 3 additional ones that we founded. One that controls the infrastructure, one that controls all colleagues that operate and provide support.
Personnel, yeah.
Exactly. And the last one is the trust center.
Okay.
So the European Sovereign Cloud, the PKI infrastructure that we use ourselves behind the scenes to operate the cloud, right? All of that is new, and all of that is regional to the European Sovereign Cloud too. Yeah. So own root certificate authority, own crypto material. And the last part that's probably interesting for our audience is that there is even a copy, not only of all the build artifacts that get deployed, so that the local colleagues can make a call about rolling back or approving. But what they can also do is they have full access to the source code of all services.
Okay. That comes back to the code question before, right? So, okay, good. So theoretically, someone could inspect the source code of all the services if they wanted to.
They
were super critical.
And, I don't want to hypothesize, but in any type of, let's say, catastrophic disruption scenario, whatever the reason is,
good point, yeah.
This is something that can stand on its own and survive.
Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. Good. Anything else we need to know you want to share?
We're very excited about launching the AWS European Sovereign Cloud, and we're about to launch it. So we announced last year that we'd be ready by end of 2025. And you know what? Knock on wood, but everything looks wonderful. We're about to be ready to launch it, and I'm very excited. This has been years in the making. We've invested a lot of thought and heart blood into this, so I'm just happy to see customers come up with interesting deployment patterns, which they're already sharing with us. And they're coming up with things, Holger, that we were not expecting ourselves.
Okay. Very good to know. It's a topic of jour. Also the commercial side, sovereign cloud's a big question, right? AI started all the question again because AI is only as good as the data, and I don't want to put my data potentially outside of the EU, outside of my country, outside of my data center. So, well, this was a great conversation with Mustafa Isik, Chief Technologist for Sovereign Cloud.
Absolutely.
Okay. I learned a lot here. Really appreciate it. I hope you learned a lot too. This is Holger Mueller from Constellation Research. Thanks for watching.